Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are all well. Another very interesting week this week, and particularly for us here in Prism, this is one of the very few and first occasions where we're all here in Scotland. In fact, we're all within a very short distance of each other, and I'll explain the reason why, but it's nice. It's a nice, and I'm getting a good cup of tea with good Scottish water. Can't beat it. Anyway, there's been two huge political things this week, Phil. The biggest one, of course, being the gathering of the Liberate Scotland people in Stirling for a fundraiser, a knees up, a get together, an absolute blessing of people together. And Rachel from Accounts, she did something. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you were there. We were all there. How did you enjoy last night, Phil? Tell the viewers what it was like.
It was one of these. It just took me back to the Yes campaign. That's what it did. There was ISP. There was sovereignty. There was just the people that we often refer to, the small folk that keep the pilot light burning for the independence movement. I think Julie McAnulty's mate said to me, an old colleague of mine from ISP, she said it was the shot in the arm that we all needed, and it was in a damp, horrible night in Scotland. We've plenty of other events on. Christmas coming, Christmas festivities coming. People with no money in their pocket, not much. Denise Somerville up for Ayrshire. Techie down for Aberdeen. We had, and that's beautiful, wonderful Welsh couple. I know you want to talk about them, who visited us and came up from Wales. It was an absolute joy, and the usual suspects. A lot of the usual suspects, the stalwarts, who will not give up on this. And it was great. It's always great, not just to talk and communicate with these individuals, but to spend an evening in their company. And we had a great band playing kind of Scottish traditional music, because the whole idea was that we want to be able to talk to each other, bolster and run ideas off each other, and just to get that feeling of camaraderie, that we're all on the same page, all facing the direction, which is in complete contrast to all the political parties, so-called independence-seeking political parties, who are all facing different directions, and the bun fights continue. It was wonderful. It was wonderful, Roddy.
It was good. You're right. There were people from all over Scotland, Ayrshire, Wales, even a guy from Spain come over. Great. That was fabulous. But that was one of the. I mean, you like me, but you've been going to these things for years. And we're not just saying there was a certain, I don't know, atmosphere in there. But the raffle was a particular thing. Now, all of you folks watching this will know when there's a raffle and you say to people, bring along a raffle prize. The raffle went on for about an hour, because I think everyone in the room brought stuff. And I mean, it wasn't rubbish stuff. It was absolute top quality. I managed to get myself a nice new Scotland football jersey, which will come handy in America in 26, if I get in the country, that is. But it was a certain buzz, Eva. It really was buzzing. And they were stacked with people.
Well, as you know, Roddy, we'd had the afternoon session for some of our candidates, and that was positive, and it was organised, and it was motivational. Thanks in no small measure to Alan's efforts in particular were information relative to candidate handbooks and processes that people have to follow, so that we make sure that our candidates are all on the same page, but all know what the arrangements are for the election, and everybody follows all the rules. So that was decent in the afternoon, getting to chat to each other, but we all know each other. The candidates all know each other. Where the heart-stopping moment for me was walking into the evening event, not knowing how many people would be there, and being overwhelmed by the support in the room and the numbers of folk that had turned up, many of whom, as you've already said, have travelled long distances, quite apart obviously from yourself and Phil. Norrie Hunter was there from Drumnadrochit, others that have already been mentioned, the couple that came up from Wales, John and Yuki from Glasgow. Bill from nearer hand in Dunblane, folk from Fife, folk from Tayside, folk from Argyll and Bute, folk from the Borders, big contingent from Perth. And it felt like pretty well every part of Scotland was represented there last night. And the common denominators running through the conversations were, apart from thanks to yourself, Rod, for creating and operating and continuing through a Scottish prism, we learned how important what we say here and what we listen to from our viewers, how much all of that means to people whose desire is independence for our country. It's not party affiliation. It's not about individual bums on seats. It's not about gravy trainers. It's about bringing that dream true, by realising that dream and the purpose of what the dream is about, and about how independence is to secure the potential of all Scots born and as yet to be born. I said that last night, but that was what everybody was saying to me. Every single person that I spoke to was describing a renewal of optimism that came with last night's events. And yes, there were discussions about the movement being fractured, and there are frustrations and there's a desperation because people in Scotland have a desire for independence. The majority desires independence. We know this. So it was incumbent upon us there as representatives of Liberate Scotland not to be talking to people, not to be talking at people, but to be listening to people. And that's what we did last night. And it was very, very heartening to hear the support that there is for a drive towards unity and a real cogent campaign for independence next year, not party politicking, but a position where people say Scotland is a country, not a county. We were a nation before, we'll be a nation again. How do we harness that optimism and the ability and the power and the potential of the people of Scotland to turn this country right around? So for me, that's what last night was about. It was about listening to people's hopes and dreams, listening to their frustrations, but also encouraging others to come forward. So without going into too much detail, it was very heartening that last night some folk there were explaining not just that they want to be activists, which is really important, and they want to leaflet, they want to canvass, they want to campaign, they want to see street activity, they want to be on marches and rallies, they want to be talking to their friends and their family and the folk that they meet at the supermarket or at the petrol station or at their work or whatever, but they really want to see the politicians who support independence getting together and creating the circumstances for an independence vote next year, especially because, as our friends from Wales said, as others with Irish connections said, and others from right around Scotland said, Westminster is at its weakest. Now is the day, now is the hour for unity within our campaign, and then we will have our independence next year. So that was very much the flavour of the room. Although there was sadness and desperation, there was an absolute steely determination to make sure that our country will be an independent country again. The sooner, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, I feel really humbled when I meet these people and they speak to us and talk about PRISM and say how much it means to them. And it's a responsibility, and hopefully it's a responsibility we all take and deal with responsibly ourselves. It's fantastic. But there was also, we didn't mention, there was people from the SNP there last night in Alapa who are equally as frustrated as the rest of us with what's happening in the movement and want to see movement together. And they, down, as you would often say, Eva, the small folk are willing to come together. It's the high hegians, Alan, that seem to be the problem. But last night, I mean, it was just an electric atmosphere.
It was absolutely brilliant. The whole day was brilliant, and it showed dedication of Liberate Scotland candidates that come there from 10:30 onwards to first go through the training in the afternoon, which everybody knows isn't an exciting thing to go through, but it's a necessary thing. And our candidates put their hearts and souls into it, and they're now ready to go. But at night time, I mean, the event started at 7 o'clock. I went into the room about 5:45 to start setting up, and people started arriving. I couldn't believe it. They were so enthusiastic wanting to come in there. And remember the words of the Declaration of Arbroath? So long as 100 of us remain alive. Well, there was certainly 100 at that event last night, all ready to take the claymores out and fight the battles of Scotland. The emotion was unbelievable. And like Eva said, like you said, the SNP members that were there, the ALBA members there, they're all willing to put party aside and put the country first, because they know this election is very important. They know that in 2028, the likelihood is that reform will take over. And we won't get a referendum, and we probably won't even have a Scottish Parliament left. They all know the importance of this election. This could possibly be our last chance to take on at a ballot box at a Scottish Parliament election to get our independence. Because the referendum is not an option, and every single member that was there last night knows that. But I have to say, I had to go into hiding for a wee while, because Val was trying to claim me as a toy boy, I think. The way she told me about that dance floor. It was absolutely brilliant. People were just really, it was like the olden days at the SNP conferences, the old Kayleys that we used to have. It was brilliant. And people left there singing their hearts out. The blood was boiling in their veins. They were just raring to go. So hopefully that'll stay with them. And they were all saying, when's the next one? When's the next one? So we will be working on that as soon as possible. I think that Colette's going to try and get a Burn Supper organised, which again will be an excellent event. So keep tuned in, and we will let you know exactly what's going to be happening.
Yeah. The other thing was, I know that we, the organisers thought, well, if we break even, that'll be fine, because the idea is to bring people together and have it. And a few quid was made last night because of the general. The great, I mean, the beauty of it is they've spent money to bring us raffles, and then they bought the tickets to get to try and win back their own raffles or whatever. It was just fantastic. You know, but one thing, you've been involved right from the start in the Liberate Scotland, Lloyd. Now, the one thing that came across in the train, we know, and I was talking to a few people about it last night, of all the questions that we've been asked by because most of them are, shall we say, electoral virgins. They've never stood before. They are independents for independence, most of them, in all the parties. Not one of them said, well, what's the pay? What's the pension like? What's the terms and conditions? None of them are interested in that. They're only interested in the one thing, and one thing only. We even had someone last night almost volunteering. He was on the case, by the way, about that one. But these people are all determined not for pay, not for glory, nor riches. It is for the independence of our nation, and it is heartwarming.
Yeah, absolutely. There were a couple of people that I spoke to who hadn't really considered the idea of standing in an election. They've been activists, have taken part in elections before, but who are now seriously thinking that they need to take part. And I think that, you know, that's the message I want to get across to people is if you have an inkling and you want to take part, then we'll give you the support that you need. And in actual fact, what makes Liberate Scotland unique in itself is that it is organic. It is genuinely growing from the grassroots upwards. And I think also because there's no parade of egos, I think it makes it easier for people to say, well, I can take part in that as well. And that was really heartening about last night. I mean, you know, we could go on about the fact that there was a kind of nostalgic feel in as much as it was like reliving the old days up to a point. But the reality is it was much, much more than that. This is a much, much more positive, forward-looking kind of vision. Everybody's smiling. Nobody's sitting in the corner moping. That I think was the lasting kind of picture for me. And also knowing that there were people non-party, party, ex-party, but primarily simply people who believe that we should be an independent country, but people who are not that interested in it for themselves, but have a full understanding that this is about the future generations. It's not about today. It's not about yesterday. It's about tomorrow and the decades ahead. And that to me was fantastic. No jockeying for position, no chit chat in that kind of horrible internal party kind of nonsense of you heard what so and so's up to and you heard what so and so's up to. Just wasn't an element of it. And yes, possibly the Guinness Book of Records should be brought along for the next time we have a raffle, if last night's anything to go by, because it certainly would make an entry. No, but it was magnificent. But as Eva and everyone's referred to, the geographical spread. People from the Highlands, the Islands, the Northeast, the Borders, Central, Fife, Glasgow, Edinburgh, and all the way from Carnarvon as well. I think when you have that national, that's the sense of national unity. And I think, as Alan said, the biggest surprise of all was we had no real idea of whether or not this was going to be something special or an absolute belly flop. And I think we were all more than surprised by the extraordinary turnout that there was. But just the joy of the evening was fantastic. And I look forward to the next one.
Yeah, one of the highlights for me was Frank. It was a guy, Frank, who said he just got wind of this yesterday and he jumped in his car and he arrived and he spoke to you, Eva, and he said, I haven't got a ticket. What about that? And you said, I'll just go and buy a load of raffles. He won about 6 prizes. Every time I turned around, he was away with another prize. So he got his money's worth as well. But the fact that he just did it spontaneously was fantastic. But that's Techie. Can you stick up along the bottom there where they can contact us, info@liberatescot.scot? Because, folks, if you want to get involved, and we want you to get involved, and even if you're sitting there going, well, I don't really know if I've done it, I've never done this before. But as Lloyd and the guys are telling you, we'll guide as much as we can. There's a lot of experience in the group, not just here you see on Prism, but the others from ISP, etc. And so there's experience and there's help and there's, help you along the way. But we need help to help you, to help our nation. And it can't be done by tweeting or putting posts on Facebook only. We need to get active. So please get in touch. We will help as much, but we need you to help us. So I know we could go on, I'll probably go on all night doing anecdotal stories in this, Phil, but I suppose we have to cover some of the other things that happened and all the reasons why we need to get to hell out of Dodge. Because Rachel from Accounts, who was named here first by Mr. Quinnan, brought forward her budget. Now, I've lived through a few budgets. They're always the same, Phil. They're always going to this, that, and the next thing, but they never succeed. And this one was appalling.
Most certainly. It's becoming routine now, isn't it? One dreadful budget after another. One slice of austerity served up time and time again. So this, if it's okay, rather than going into too much detail, I'd like, can we do this in 2 parts? So the first will be what we're hearing and what the individuals are hearing, what we really hear from the mainstream media and what we're being told and how reliable that is. And the second point would be a more, if we can get returned to it a wee bit later in the programme, then we can look at what the reality of it is from objective commentators. And because I don't want to go on too long while not letting everybody else pitch in and do their stuff on this. So basically what I'm saying is the UK budget, it depends on whose side you're on as to your position taken on this. So while I'm interested in what is said, I'm also very interested in who is saying it, because most commentators are not on the side of the people, unlike Liberate Scotland and unlike all those wonderful people from last night. So the Institute for Fiscal Studies, for example, state that this was a big budget, but not in the way people were necessarily expecting. Yes, there was a big tax rise. Today's 26 billion isn't far short of last year's 32 billion. Yes, there was an increase in headroom, more than doubling the buffer against the fiscal blah, 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 right? And it goes into the 22 billion. It talks about sizable increases in borrowing in the short term, spending pressure outside direct government control. Basically, it was an excuse, and it goes on to go into more detail about the OBR forecast. Now, the OBR is the Office for Budget Responsibility. So you've got the Institute for Fiscal Studies quoting the OBR without even questioning them and saying, alongside this widely expected but fairly modest downgrade to the forecast for productivity, blah, 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 right? You're getting these growths. These forecasts. This is what they said was bringing all that together. The upshot was that the OBR, this is the IFS speaking, did not hand Rachel Reeves much of a fiscal repair job. Before accounting for any policy changes, she would have a small current budget surplus of 4 billion at 29.30, and after accounting for the policy U-turns in the spring, it would have been a very small deficit indeed. And it could have been worse for the Chancellor. Basically what they're doing is papering over, which is a shyster, complete shyster budget. We can come on to that later. I know everybody else has got opinions on this. So who are the IFS? If you look at the Institute for Fiscal Studies on the website, they say it's the leading independent economics research institute, world-class research, helps policymakers. Now, are they neutral? Well, no. They're right-wing. Media bias fact check report them as being right of centre. Open democracy. And you check out Open Democracy, a good source if you want to figure out the validity of who you're listening to or who's been forced down your throat, is an independent international media platform. And they look at journalism and challenge power. This is a site that challenges power. And they say the IFS, their political ideology reveals itself most obviously in its approach to inequality. At several points on its websites, we are warned that reliance on taxing the rich and big companies to pay more has its limits and would be far from risk-free. We find no more equivalent warning about the risks associated with increased equality or the growing concern of corporate power. Repeatedly placing rich in inverted commas is in itself an indicator of political orientation. Another concrete example of their bias can be found in the discussion on living standards and prospects of younger generation. They attribute the problems to younger households face to enter the housing market to demographics, average age rise, and low interest rates. And the financial market deregulation that has fueled poverty price inflation goes unmentioned. We're warned of long-term change in the balance of the economic power between young and old, but not rich and poor, not the class war, not labour, not capital, not usury economics. So they ignored the whole Western bubble crash that were coming. And given what the IFS report and what the OBR says, who are the OBR? They're similar. They're just another. They're just another bunch of shysters, and you're looking at basically. I'll save my comments. Let everybody else comment on what they feel this is about, because I usually go to Richard Murphy, who'll come on to. I'll come on to in the second chance of looking at this. But as far as I'm concerned, the information that most of us get on this, and it's dull, it's boring, it's jargon, it's basically accounting terms that most of us don't understand and have no inclination to understand. So what the problem is for me, we're getting information primarily from the right wing. They know what side their bread's buttered on. So pretty much everything you hear from mainstream media is establishment supporting and at least right of centre. What the truly independent analysts state, well, I'll come on to that once everybody else has a chance to comment.
Yeah, there is something that comes out a day or two later. I can't remember what you call it, when the nitty-gritty of the budget comes out, the things you don't hear in the headlines. But one of the things that we hear this morning, Eva, when we all got up, they all said, well, I don't know what the question is, what we're going to talk about. So, we'll have to mention the budget, etc. But that's the thing about it is, it's all theatre at Westminster, not just on budget day, but, Prime Minister's questions, where the Prime Minister is given the questions before he goes, so he's got an answer ready and a smart, and they've got people placed. Everything's theatre. It's all fixed and rigged. And the Tories are saying, making out as if, well, if we were there, this wouldn't happen. They only left in July 24. They're trying to say that since then, it's all gone south. They want to scrap stamp duty, scrap the ERB, scrap the ECHR. They never want to build or increase taxes to improve public services. It's always scrap. We would do. They're bad, no good. And at the end of the day, it's the public that end up paying the price for this stupidity and theatre at Westminster.
I agree 100%, but I would look at this very much through a Scottish prism. And it's a budget for Westminster. It's not a budget for Scotland. It's not a budget for Wales. It's not a budget for Northern Ireland. It's a budget for Westminster, which is England-centric. Mm-hmm. And for as long as we are thorough to that union, we're going to continue having these performances, which only make Scotland poorer. If you wanted to actually genuinely tackle not simply child poverty, but poverty across the board, including particularly for the working poor, you would take transformational action at Westminster, but you would also seize independence for Scotland and transform Scotland practically overnight, because you have to look at what are the root causes of poverty and inequality. And whilst poverty and inequality has been generational throughout the UK, but obviously we're most interested in Scotland, the major causes are that housing costs are far too high Food prices are now far too high, in large part because of the impact of Brexit. And energy costs are unnecessarily high and, quite frankly, shamefully high. These are the areas that ought to be targeted. And were we an independent country, we could have a parliament of a people's parliament that Colette referred to last night, populated and run by people who understand Scotland's needs and Scotland's priorities and know how to solve the problems, many of which could be solved practically overnight. Others will take longer because of the centuries of deprivation to which Scotland has been subject because of the impact of the Union and the fact that it's London-centric. So what is needed is an independence programme whereby when we become independent, we can have what we don't have just now. And that would be get the weapons of mass destruction off the Clyde. It would be creating a national house building corporation, a national energy company. We would not be looking at statistics for children in poverty or for single working adults who live in poverty, because they're a massive demographic who are usually forgotten about. But this is because employers get away with paying wages that in the real world are far too low, and they pay people part-time so that people who have worked as hard as they can, done the hours that they can do, still qualify for a top-up by way of universal credit, which in essence is the government bankrolling the employers. So there is transformational change that could occur via Westminster, but it won't, because they don't want to scare the horses any more than they already have, and because the current government is utterly inept in economic terms. Were they not, then budgets would be redrawn dramatically. You would not have the billions that are going into funding illegal wars or weaponry that's going abroad to perpetuate war, legal or otherwise. And what you would have would be a Prime Minister who has his eye very much on the domestic issues that really matter, not lip service, talking occasionally about children living in poverty, when Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves had the opportunity with a stroke of a pen to turn all of that around for so many people by increasing taxation on those who actually can afford it, and not saying everybody's got to pay something, because some people are paying far too much. In Scotland, for example, and this will be the same in other parts of the UK, but particularly in Scotland, because that's what we care about most, the result of poverty and inequality is premature death. And we know that. We know that from the statistics in terms of life expectancy, etc. And that is why the drive for independence is so desperate and so urgently and necessarily required, because people in Scotland are suffering. They're skint when they shouldn't be. They're working and they're still skint at the end of the week or at the end of the month, and that is plainly wrong. I would imagine Alan will maybe have something to say in terms of benefits and disability issues and related matters, but these are all areas where there's been a huge amount of trouble and carry on and arguments about motability cars and level of benefits that are paid to people by commentators that have not got a damn clue what they're talking about, and by people who are targeting the weakest and the most vulnerable because they're easy targets and they're distractions, taking the eye away from where it should be. And where it should be is that this Labour government promised change. And yes, they've delivered change, but certainly not change for the better. They are driving Britain down, and they know they're doing that. And the quicker we can get out of there, the better.
Absolutely. I mean, you remember, there's only a year ago, they were saying, oh, it's Tories are the problem. If we just change out the Tories and bring in Labour, it'll all be great. Now they're saying, oh, they're as bad. Get them out. We'll bring in Nigel. It'll be great. No, it won't, folks. It's the entire system. Because here's the thing, as I say, I've been beyond my 3 and 10, and I remember all these budgets, and it's always, well, we'll have to pull our belts in another notch. By pulling our belts, they mean the poor, the ones with the least. So, but they want to have their vanity stuff. Here's the way. Why can't they just scrap Trident, scrap HS2, scrap funding Ukraine, scrap the Ajax fighting vehicle, cut the Royal Grant, get rid of the House of Lords and, 800 Tories getting paid 300 odd quid a day, and put in a second elected chamber with a fraction of the amount of people and cost. That way, it's not the poor and the vulnerable that have to pull their belt in one notch. That would be the people who can afford it to pay it most.
Yeah, but those people are the ones that fund the political party system.
Yeah, I know.
That's why. They are the bosses. They're the ones who make all the decisions, them in the civil service. Politicians are just the puppets of the civil service, and that has got to change, and it will have to change when we get independence, because we not just want independence for our country, we want independence for our people, so they are not being manipulated by these civil servants. But I mean, as said, I was quite lucky because, unlike any other budget, I was able to prepare a response before the Chancellor gave her budget, because the OBR released it early. So it was very unusual. And like I said in that statement I gave, it was like Paul Daniels economics. They gave you with one hand while they were dipping your pocket with the other hand. I mean, big headlines, 2-child tax. That cap has gone. But they also increased the cap on energy prices. So anything you benefited from the 2-child cap, you lost more than that with the energy. So they're taking it from one, they're giving it to you in one hand and then giving it to the private sector in the other hand. Now, within an independent Scotland, we could have the industry nationalised. And to nationalise it, we don't have to buy any other company. We just have to create a new company, a nationalised company, and have the prices so competitive that they will have to either lower the prices or go out of business. It's as simple as that. They believe in the market value, then we will play them at their own game. But even the other tax areas that they've done with the electric vehicles. Now, for years, they were telling people, you've got to get an electric vehicle, it'll save you this money. And people were convinced. So they went away down that line, bought it. And now they've been hit with £180 road tax, I think it is, that they said they would never have to pay. And then 3 pence a mile that they've got to pay. Now, we've just checked the allowances for members of parliament. When they're driving their vehicles, they don't pay 3 pence a mile. They receive 45 pence a mile for the first 10,000 miles that they have. Miles over 10,000 miles is 25 pence a mile over that. If you drive a motorcycle, you get 24 pence a mile. And if you ride a bike, you get 20 pence a mile. Now, why are you getting 20 pence a mile for riding a bike? But if you're driving an electric vehicle, you're having to pay them 3 pence a mile. One rule for them, another rule for everyone else.
Yeah.
I mean, the budget, like every other budget, was to help the southeast of England, and Scotland is suffering yet again.
Yeah.
Sarwar's trying to claim credit because he asked. Now, remember that word, asked the Chancellor for 800 odd million. That wasn't what happened. Barnett Consequences covered every single penny of that, and we're still not getting the money back that we pay into it. So this isn't a favour they're doing us. It's a wee bit of extra pocket money, trying to get Sarwar elected to the Scottish Parliament. It was pure politics, nothing else. Westminster cannot be trusted. They cannot be trusted with our money. They cannot be trusted with our lives. And they certainly cannot be trusted with our children's future. No. That's why we need full independence, full macroeconomic policy decisions, because that way Scotland would have the opportunity of saying no more wars, no more weapons of mass destruction. We will put investment into our people. We will create jobs, real paid jobs, not minimum wage, not the living wage, as they call it. It'll be a real wage. So people are happy at their job, happy doing their job, and able to live a life and not just survive. Because at this present time, too many people are just surviving. But even on the mobility vehicles that Eva was saying, I just had to replace Megan's mobility vehicle because it's after 5 years old. For the vehicle that we got this year, the last one we got, we had to put a £3,000 down payment onto that. This year, we had to put a £10,000 deposit down on that vehicle before we were able to get it. Luckily enough, I was able to get a grant from charitable organisation to do that, because £10,000 people on universal credit cannot have that in their account, because if they have that kind of money in their account, their universal credit gets cut.
Yeah.
So how does that system work? You need that money to get a vehicle that the government's saying that you require, but if you save up money to actually pay for that, you will be punished, because we will take your benefit from you for the equivalent amount. It's just, the system is totally warped. And people have got to stop blaming others for what's happening, because it is not the fault of the poor. It is not the fault of the disabled. It is not the fault of foreigners. Every single decision that is taken is a decision by the government. It is a political choice, not a necessity, a political choice. There's always areas to find where waste is running rampant, but that's not what they do. What they want to do is find someone else to blame, and they do it every single time. So people waking up. The problems in this country is politicians. That's why we have got to break the party system.
Yeah. Politicians and greed is the problem. You mentioned, Alan, that some are just surviving, some are not surviving. That's the tragedy and the worry. And the other ones that Eva talks about all the time, about addiction and suicides and things, that's what's happening because of the cruelty. And there's no need for it. Well, one of the richest countries in the world is in this union. And I mean, if they did it properly and fairly, there might not even be a Scottish independence movement, but they don't, and they feed their pals and everything else. But you mentioned about the electrical vehicle. They did the same with diesel, if you remember. Years ago, they wanted to get everyone into diesel vehicles, and they made diesel cheaper, much cheaper than ordinary four-star. Now they've started upping it up, not upping it. They're con merchants all the bloody time. But here's one of the things. We know you were talking about the child cap. Now, there's Lloyd, not so long ago, last year, here's Annis claimed that scrapping the two-child market could spook the markets. And so back in July 24, they voted against it, because it was a bad thing. And then, of course, they suspended all these guys. And now Sarwar and pals are trying to say, oh, well, the SNP could have done this, which is a lie. And the media won't, of course, pull them up in that lie. But now they're trying to grab the headlines and say, look at the good guys we are. They're absolute charlatans.
Absolutely. I mean, the level of hypocrisy, particularly over the two-child cap, is extraordinary. I mean, watching those pictures from when Rachel from Accounts was making her statements and the Labour Party was sitting there waving their order papers, when in actual fact they'd removed 8 members of their own party for voting against this thing. And also, as Alan referred to, you referred to, this nonsense of Sarwar claiming that he asked the Chancellor, and the Chancellor in her beneficence gave, and then her actually referencing Sarwar during her statement, when in actual fact, I mean, we all know that all of this is directly related to the Barnett consequentials. There was nothing to do with the largesse of the Chancellor. I mean, what's most irritating and most annoying is the way they are treating people like they are idiots. They treat us like we are fools, that we don't understand any of this stuff, when it's patently obvious, and has been patently obvious from the day and hour that Rachel Reeves got the job. She hasn't got a clue what the hell she's doing, But I think also, given the chit-chat there's been since her statement, she's about to be rolled right under the bus, because if she doesn't go, then Starmer's going to have to go. And we all know that Starmer looks after Starmer because Starmer works for somebody else. Starmer is very important to certain powerful groups in this world, particularly a certain particular country in the Middle East, that requires him to be in the position that he's in to do what he's getting up to, not to mention the fact his good friend Mr. Zelensky will want Starmer to stay. So, Rachel's expendable. But then again, Rachel thinks that the people of this country are expendable. Because if in real terms she wanted to make any kind of change to the lives of the mass of the people of the country, then there's one thing you do. you address the issue of energy costs, because energy costs are the single cost, the single reason why everything else is expensive.
Yeah.
Everything, transport, food, the running the health service, train fares, absolutely everything is dependent on the price and cost of energy. And being, as we are, we come from an energy-rich country, we should be up in arms about this. The Scottish government should be up in arms about this. I mean, you know, if you combine the insanity of us having the highest energy costs in the OECD countries, or effectively in the Northern Hemisphere, if you address that absurdity, then you have to also take into account, why are we having the closure of Grangemouth and now the loss of the ethylene plant at Mossmorton? These are related directly to energy costs. It's utterly and completely absurd that in this scrabble for the chimera that is net zero, we have the taxation regime, which effectively means that if you make ethylene in Fife at Mossmorton, it costs more than shipping it from the United States. It's an utter and complete nonsense. It's costing jobs. It's creating great tensions in families, great tensions in businesses as well. The business supply chain into Mossmorton, the business supply chain into Grangemouth, all are suffering because of a nonsensical idea by people who don't really understand the nature of the job that they have. And I mean by that is Mr. Miliband and Miss Reeves are playing with things they do not understand, but they make people suffer. And again, I go back to the central point here. If you want to make changes that are going to benefit the vast majority of the people in this country, it would be addressing the issue of high energy costs, because everybody, absolutely everybody, requires and uses energy. But those at the bottom of the pile, those on the lowest wages, those on benefits, in actual fact, their energy costs, they bear the burden of the highest energy cost to a far, far greater degree than those who are higher up the earnings ladder. To me, I do not for the life of me understand that a country that has, and what I mean here is not our country, Scotland, I mean the United Kingdom, a country that has the energy beneficence that it has, does not understand that that's the tool, the primary most important tool to control the cost of living. Because if you don't understand that, whose pockets are you in? And this is, you know, getting back to what some of the things that Phil has said and no doubt will say, is if your focus in reality is pandering to the right wing, is pandering to those on the in the City of London and those on the Lloyd's Register, if that's your focus, then the people at the bottom will always be the ones who suffer. And there is the absurdity of that is, this is a Labour government that's doing this. But then again, through my lifetime, I've seen Labour move from being the party sort of the people to now being sort of the City of London. And not just sort of the City of London. They are the party of the City of London now, just as much as the Tories are, and equally as much as Reform are. And the people of our country, Scotland, have to understand we have an opportunity, and that opportunity comes in May of 2026 to get ourselves out of this benighted union, so that we, an energy-rich country, can apply our resources to improve the lives of the mass of the people of this country. That should be our focus. It should be the focus of the Scottish Parliament. It should be the focus of the Scottish Government. But most importantly, it should be the focus of all of us and all of the people of this country. It's time to go, or we get dragged down with all the rest of them.
We do indeed, absolutely. One of the things, the biggest exporters in the UK, Phil, is Scotland. Between our fisheries, our oil, our gas, our whiskey, our gin. I mean, I don't know if people know that 80%, and I speak as an expert on gin. 80% of all the gin in the UK is made in Scotland. It's the latter, folks. It's the latter. But here's the one. The whiskey chief from the Scottish Whisky Association, himself probably of the right wing, most of them are in that organisation, but they were pleading and begging and saying, stop, you can't keep taxing us and expect us to give you growth and wealth, if you keep taxing and taxing, they're going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. That's our biggest export. They're going to cripple the industry with their greed and their stupidity and their lack of economic knowledge, Phil.
There's no doubt about that, but it's been ever thus. We're spiraling into absolute chaos, and we'll finish some comments on the budget as to why this is happening and what exactly is happening. But whiskey's I don't know what the tax is now. It's a ridiculous amount of tax, and especially when you look at the tariffs that Americans now have to pay to buy whiskey. The pressure on the industry is stupendous. I believe that, I can't remember if it's still happening. My brother's a distiller was telling me sales were down for a bit, and there's a bit of a backlog because the costs of making whiskey and the tax on it is choking the industry, and it should be nurtured because it's so important to our will be as an independent Scotland. But why is this happening, and why are they being punished? Why is whiskey being punished? And gin is as well. And a big shout out to Rob and Wendy for the Welsh gin and the Call of Carmarthen. That was a pretty cool thing to do. We really, really appreciated that amongst all the other wonderful people from last night. So Alan was bang on. Who's really in control? Answer: City of London. Lloyd also. Most of the politicians actually understand what's going on. They just work for the corporations in the City of London, not the people. So for truly independent analysis on the budget, I suggest you look to Richard Murphy. Now, Richard Murphy, he was a chartered accountant for 40 years and now he's a political economist, emeritus professor of accounting at Sheffield, the Management School, director of Tax Research LLP, check his website, director of the Corporate Accountability Network, co-founder of he knows his stuff, and the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales named Richard as the top online UK influencer in accountancy from 2019 right through to 24, and he was second in 2024. But he's top ever since. www.taxresearch.org.uk. And even though Richard is an Englishman, he writes for the National and has great interest in Scotland and sees it economically, quite simply, as potentially the richest part of Britain. And this is why shouldn't you be independent. He's a really good guy. But check his blog, particularly on that website called Reeves Budget Built on Fear, posted today. So it says Reeves' budget was a damp squib, in a nutshell, delivering austerity by stealth. There was no vision, no investment, just the fear of the City of London. Check out the transcript. Watch him on YouTube. He opens with a statement, it feels like it was a terrible damp squib. This was a hollow budget, he goes on to say, a budget that really delivered austerity, a budget in which the city won because nothing was done to harm it. And she should have done things to tackle wealth and the abuses that go on there. And as a consequence, the people lost. The people lost. This was a budget, above all else, without vision. It was a budget made up of excuses, and that's worth talking about, because if this is where we are economically, we're in deep trouble. Let's be clear, he says. Rachel Reeves gave the city everything it demanded. She flew ideas out from the Treasury, as if he says, with like spaghetti trying to find a wall to stick to. It's a really good analogy. And nothing did stick. Everything she suggested was thrown back at her. And by whom? The city. Because the City of London says, we won't tolerate that. And so she didn't do it. Anything of any sort that might have delivered something radical was basically rejected by those who are really in charge. Not by the public, not by Labour MPs, not by the Parliament. It was rejected by the powers that be in the City of London. And that was enough for Rachel Reeves to sit quietly, timidly in her office and deliver a non-entity of a budget. And as a consequence, she did nothing to add value to our economy. She did not announce any new investment that will make any significant change in this country. She did impose austerity by stealth, but she denies it, as Labour have done. Watch my lips, anus. There will be no austerity. Absolute garbage. We do know there will actually be cuts in government spending in some areas, like education, again, justice, again, in local authorities, again, with massive impacts for some groups in society, mostly the poor, as both Alan and Eva and Lloyd, and you've all spoke on it quite eloquently. For example, everybody around special education needs, and I know this is a sore point with Alan, knows that they will be even in deeper crisis in the years to come than it is already because of these never-ending cuts. Mental health is unseen. Why there's so many people on the streets that should be getting treatment. It's the easiest one to cut. There are the government, the NHS aren't taking in any more apprentice psychologists. And this is the real sting in the tail. She raised taxes to pay for her own failure. And people that are really angry about that, you should be. If you're paying attention, it's not easy to do so, but it's worth it. And read Murphy because he speaks in clear, simple terms. He doesn't jargonize using complex. He can do because he's a chartered accountant and understands the economics of this, but he puts it in simple, understandable terms. If I'm paying more, okay, if I'm paying more, what am I getting? That's the question we should all be asking ourselves. And the answer is nothing. And can you blame folk? In that case, why are we putting up with more of this austerity? Because why would we? Why would we pay so much for an empty vision? And it's a reasonable question. So for me, for the final point in this, the revolution will not be televised by mainstream media, but we, the people, will make the revolution happen. And two, we will also record it. Up the revolution.
Absolutely. Two things I'd just like to say that maybe some of our viewers will know. Your comment about the City of London holding sway with Westminster. There is a person in Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, you may not know
Remembrancer.
The Remembrancer. He sits in a box under the gallery. And if he hears something that they think...
Wee moustache.
Wouldn't be surprising. Every so often he does that. If he hears anything that might be bad for the city, he quickly tells the Mr. Speaker to, get that sorted, and they let them know in uncertain terms. Also, the English king, not our king, he's no king of Scots, the English king cannot enter the square mile of London without the permission of the Lord Mayor of London. And I don't mean Sadiq Khan, I mean the actual city square mile of London. That's the power of the City of London, Eva. It's quite scary, and that's what should be taken into account. That's why our country is suffering, because the City of London doesn't want to suffer. And by the city, I mean the square mile.
That's certainly a major part of the problem. But the other issue, I think, which is developing very obviously, is that there's a scorched earth policy relative to Scotland now from Westminster. That was evident in the, in inverted commas, Save Grangemouth campaign that Labour pretended to operate in the run-up to last year's general election. Remember, I say it every week. If you want to save Grangemouth, you vote Labour. So people voted Labour, and guess what happened to Grangemouth? Mm-hmm. So here we are now, and I don't intend to be flippant about this, but it's very difficult not to completely lose the rag. But here we are with Mossmoran. And now my dad worked at Grangemouth, my dad worked at Mossmoran, so I know a little bit about the workforces in both places. But relative to Mossmoran, Douglas Alexander, Secretary of State for Scotland, said, and I quote, here we go, "There is no route to profitability for the Mossmoran chemical plant in Fife," Scottish Secretary Douglas Alexander said. He ruled out either nationalisation or direct UK government investment because there was no route to profitability identified. Kate Forbes retaliated by citing the assistance that the UK government had given to the British steel plant in Scunthorpe. And ultimately it fell to the Tory Douglas Lumsden to say that in respect to both governments, task forces, summits and rescue plans are a product of Labour and SNP failed policies. Good God, I'm agreeing with a Tory. It is anathema to have to do so, but unfortunately he's right. Neither Westminster nor Holyrood have lifted a realistic finger to do something about Mossmoran that will ensure that the plant can continue to run. And what people sometimes forget, and I think politicians want us to forget, is that when a refinery or a plant or a business ceases production, these jobs are gone forever. And there's a brain drain of expertise and experience of people who either retire or they go abroad. And the jobs that are lost are lost to future generations. The training or the experience or the apprenticeships aren't there anymore. And so there is a ripple effect in terms of employability, if you like. And there's obviously a ripple effect in respect to supply chains. or others who are directly or indirectly impacted. So again, the budget developments at Mossmorton, lack of development in Grangemouth, all comes together to fortify the case for independence, nothing less. Because with independence, with a national energy company, with directed assistance and support to areas that are extremely important and are the linchpins of our economy and should be, Scotland would be booming. As it is, Scotland, the only country to discover oil and become a desert, unlike Norway, where it's oil fund, and we could have had that oil fund, we can still have it again. And instead, you've got arguments about whether or not the oil that's in the North Sea is going to be left there or whether it's coming out. Well, I would suggest it should be coming out for the benefit primarily and principally of the people of Scotland. And the quicker that we have our independence and we make sure that happens, the better, because otherwise the current oil and gas that's there that's going to be coming out is going to be plundered by Westminster, just like Thatcher and her successors did. And the Scottish people should stand for it, not one moment longer.
Here. And folks, we can tell you the problems, we can elucidate it, we can give you our opinions on it, but we need to do something about it, and that is independence. That going along the bottom tells you where to get in touch to do your bit. Don't just touch, shake your head and say they're right. Get involved. We need all the help we can get. To go back to encapsulate in a couple of things, Alan, I was going to bring a bottle of gin and a bottle of whiskey with me to put in the raffles. But unfortunately, being Spain, I got an early plane yesterday. The duty-free wasn't open, so I had to go and buy a bottle of whiskey and a bottle of gin here for the raffle. I was shocked when I saw the price. That whiskey that's made in Scotland and the gin that's made in Scotland, I can buy for a fraction of the cost in Spain, which includes the transportation of it to Spain and all that stuff. And yet I can get it for about, £3 or £4 a bottle cheaper in a foreign country. That's how ridiculous it is, the taxation on our biggest export.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the alcohol, it's the cigarettes as well. I mean, on the cigarettes, they tried saying they're using taxation to stop people from smoking. That's not what happened. There's still as many people smoking today as there was many years ago. They're just smoking it from the black market. And a lot of these cigarettes that are coming in are not safe. So they're putting their lives in danger. And as a result, we've got less taxation coming in now because of the increase. And the exact same thing is happening with whiskey. They continuously put the prices up, which means less people are buying it. If they brought the prices down, more people would buy whiskey and more taxation would come in. It's very similar to councils when they increase charges for things. I remember sitting in Dundee City Council and they put a 5% increase on the public swimming pool. And I asked how much extra this will bring in. And they said nothing. Because with the drop of people who use it, that'll come up to about the same revenue. So my answer to that is, well, why are you increasing it? Leave it where it is. But they've just got this thing where they've got to increase the tax. They like to do it. And there's no logical or economic reasons for doing it because it has a knock-on effect to the actual affordability of those products. And that is not rocket science. I mean, I know that. But again, we say this all the time, we've got too many people in politics that are about their incomes. And that's all they're interested in. I mean, we have, like I said yesterday, we had the training session for Liberate Scotland candidates. They come from all over Scotland, all at their own expense.
Yep.
Not one penny of expenses were paid. Because we
claimed.
We don't pay expenses and we do not expect expenses because we are looking for outcomes, not incomes. Correct. We know the only way to improve the lives of every single Scot in this country is to have total control of every policy that we could put forward. And that way we will be able to bring people out of poverty without having to claim money for ourselves for doing it. Because we want to do it. In fact, we need to do it because no one else is doing it. And like you said earlier on, Roddy, it's important because we cannot do it alone. We need the help of everyone. And remember, when Robert the Bruce got us our independence. He didn't do it by himself or with the knights. He did it with the Smafolk. And we are now calling for the Smafolk of Scotland to unite the clans, to get behind each and every Liberate Scotland candidate and fight the good fight. Because if we do that, we will be independent in 2026.
Yes, here. Well said, Alan. We've mentioned this, Lloyd, about, the Anis Sarwar, and yes, his intervention got Scotland an extra 870 million. I know because of the Great Labour Party, we're scrapped the two-child cap, and it's a load of nonsense. What we've got is, the fourth estate will not ask a question of them. They won't question them, and they won't say what we're saying is, but that would have happened anyway. It's consequential. But you stopped it getting stopped. When you come into power, they won't ask the difficult questions, because we don't have a fourth estate. We have a fifth column, Lloyd.
I think that's primarily true in as much as in the past 10, 15 to 20 years, there's been a massive reduction in both the quality and the number of journalists that we have in Scotland, and indeed right across the whole of the United Kingdom. But the bigger and more pressing issue in real terms is, where exactly do these journalists come from? What is their background? What are they connected to? Are we like the BBC or any of the mainstream media newspapers? Are they seeking out correspondents or journalists or reporters from all sections of society, or is my experience? Or is it the fact that we now have primarily journalists and reporters who come from particular sections of society? Working class kids don't expect and don't have on their radar the idea that I'll be a correspondent for the Glasgow Herald, or I'll be the political reporter for the BBC. That just isn't attempted. I mean, there's no outreach anymore as there was 20, 30 years ago. There was outreach from the BBC, from STV, from the newspapers into schools right across the country, not just the fee-paying schools, where they went out and explained to kids the possibility of a career. But then again, journalism particularly is going through this confusing period where it doesn't really understand what its function is, and we can see that. I mean, we can see that very clearly from the lack of rigor of the lack of interrogation, particularly of politicians on these big issues. Gone are the days when a reporter would be given a stonewall answer and then there'd be the follow-up question. They don't do the follow-up question anymore. And there also seems to be, particularly amongst our politicians, there seems to be this attitude of, how dare you? And you see it on the faces. John Swinney's very good at it. He's not the only one. Jenny Gilruth's another one who's very good at it, who just gives the reporter, when asked a difficult question, they give them that look of, how dare you? How dare you ask me that question? Now, they have to understand that accountability is part of the job description in politics. You have to be accountable. And if accountability, if you won't be personally accountable, then other people have to hold you to account. And if the opposition parties are not holding you to account, then it is the Fourth Estate, it is the journalists, it is the newspapers, it is the media that is required on our behalf, on behalf of the electorate, to bring these people to book. And we're seeing it drift and drift and drift to a point where now politicians know, and Rachel Reeves has proved it with the budget this week and other matters, including some things that the First Minister has said this week. They know that they can actually tell outright lies, and they will never actually be brought to account for it in any way whatsoever. That's how far we've come. Now, the more that becomes the ground upon which accountability in politics is living, the more, as each generation goes by, we ultimately will get to a point where there will be no requirement for truth in any form whatsoever in politics, which is why we desperately require in some ways, the citizen journalism that we all thought was going to happen by the massive expansion of the non-mainstream media, of social media, that would happen. But in reality, that's become a tool of the political parties as well. I mean, I saw a reporter attempting to question the First Minister on the issue of whether or not there's to be an inquiry into grooming gangs in Scotland and the sexual exploitation of children in care. And by a very circuitous route, by saying that this was an issue that Police Scotland were looking into, and then we was pressed again by the reporter who said, yeah, but surely this must be under the aegis of the First Minister. The First Minister surely should be pressing for this information. By the end of it, he had said, but yes, Police Scotland are pressing for that information. And then when we get that information, we will do something with it. So the whole thing became kind of circular. And in reality, if you listened properly, what he was saying was, I'm doing nothing. I have no intention of doing anything. While at the same time saying somebody else is dealing with it, but not taking any responsibility. I mean, ultimately, the answer to anything that involves Police Scotland is not the First Minister saying, that's an operational matter, I can't get involved in that. That's not the truth of the situation. John Swinney giving the impression that he cannot call the Chief Constable and say, Chief Constable, I think it might be a good idea you had a look at this. That's his job. But we're now getting to the point where, in this post-truth world that we're living in Scotland, where it's possible for the First Minister to completely circularize the debate and allow himself to walk in the opposite direction, saying, it's nothing to do with me. How can that possibly be? How can it possibly be that something as important, as crucial, as vital, particularly to the individuals involved, as an investigation into the sexual exploitation of children in the care in the care service in this country, how can that not be the responsibility of the First Minister, the Scottish Government, and our Parliament? It's beyond understanding. Mm-hmm. It really is.
Yep. But there is no accountability now. That's the problem, Lloyd. There isn't. It goes back to, I always remember Noam Chomsky with Andrew Marr. If you didn't think the way you do, you wouldn't be on the job you're in. And it's the same for the newspapers. If they didn't, if they weren't the right fit, they wouldn't get the job. I would never be invited to a press conference because I would ask the wrong and the awkward questions. That's why, and I'd pay for Stuart Campbell's flight up if he was allowed to get into a press conference to ask a few questions. That'd be worth the entrance ticket. We're running out of time. I want to quickly, now you guys, quickly cover a couple of quick items. Are you listening, Mr. Boswell? And one of them is this, talking of our friend, our favourite Chancellor, the fragrant Rachel in accounts. She has reiterated the position of the British government. Regardless of the Holyrood election, there will not be, what we didn't know, there will not be an independence referendum. And yet, our two other independence parties, who I plead out with just now, are still pushing SNP 1, Alapa 2. We're going to get a referendum. They'll have to give in. We know that another organisation last weekend are still talking the same nonsense, that the British government will have to give in and give a referendum. The time has come to accept there will never be another referendum, a plebiscite election, this election, and if it doesn't work this election, every other election till it happens, Phil. That's the only way to do this.
Well, I actually agree with Rachel Reeves here for once, because she's correct. There never will be another referendum, and that's a statement of fact, and the fact that John Swinney refuses to accept this fact because he knows it's a fact. He's lying. John, you're lying. You're telling lies, and you're stitching up the people of Scotland because you know damn fine there's never going to be another referendum. We won't get one, and even if we did, it would be rigged the same it was last time, and therefore the only way forward is what we're pushing to Liberate Scotland, and that's what they know damn well. Whatever the percentage of votes for SNP of those in Scotland that are going to vote, it's about 30%, 30, low 30s, whatever, right? But the numbers of people is Lloyd pointed out last night, in Scotland that want independence and will vote for it are minimum 55%, 55% plus. So that is the answer. The answer is that what we're pushing forward in Liberate Scotland, this tiny wee organisation from Acorn's Great Oaks Grow, of course. But the whole point of this is not for ourselves. We're trying to do this, and with no intention of being a party. We just want it to be a rallying point, the pressure that puts on political parties to face the right direction, straighten up and fly right. And to do that, you need to eject those who are corrupting the system from within, those who have been bought by the men in grey suits within your party. I'll give you the lists. Get in touch, give me a shout. I'll give you the list of the individuals you need to kick out. In fact, I'll give you a Honders. Let's sling them all out. And then go for independence in the big square go, England. Come on, let's do it.
It's just so obvious, Eva. I mean, everyone knows it, except do they know, or are they refusing to face the reality?
They know for damn sure and certain. Everybody knows there will never be another referendum unless Westminster are convinced that they'll win it. But because we know that majority of Scots will vote for independence, we have to do something that breaks out of the British rules that constrict us to a referendum. So what we do is we play by Scottish rules. And the way that we make the Holyrood election of next year a plebiscite is that we demand that all independent supporting parties require an agreement whereby you have one independent supporting candidate per constituency and a managed presence on the list. And the strapline for every single one of those candidates is independence, nothing less. So that when there is a majority of independents, nothing less, MSPs elected, and a majority of the popular vote cast for independents, nothing less, MSPs, that has the democratic legitimacy and it has the international recognition that is required, and that in turn puts pressure on Westminster not to grant us our independence, but to accept that it has become time to negotiate the terms of the independence settlement. And I would suggest to viewers, whether they support Liberate Scotland or otherwise at the moment, if that's the direction of travel, which it should be, because that will attain our independence, because we will have international legitimacy and democratic legitimacy and popular support. Who do you want to be negotiating the terms of the independence settlement? Do you want it to be some of those people who are sitting there either in Westminster trying to get into Holyrood, or those who are currently in Holyrood who let us down day and daily? Or do you want a fully equipped, intelligent team who have imagination, who have determination, who have intelligence, who are articulate, and most of all, don't want to be there for the sake of their own back pockets, but want to be there simply and solely to deliver independence, nothing less, and watch our country and our people prosper and realise the potential of every Scot in this country? What do you want, people? Do you want success for the country, or do you want apparent success for the continued privileged few? Because that would be the direction of travel in the absence of next year being the independence election.
Absolutely. That's the way to do it, Alan. One constituency, and I'm sure Liberate Scotland would be open to negotiations on that if there was a coming together and a unifying. But that's what we need, one in the constituency and an agreed members on the list.
Yeah, I mean, if we got an agreement with the parties that not only will it be a manifesto commitment, it will be a contract legally binding with the people of Scotland who vote for them, I would happily stand down as a candidate at that election to put and support someone else. But they have to be convincing that they will do the job that they're supposed to do. But if that doesn't happen, I will be standing in Dundee City East against the grifters. Because we've got too many grifters in this parliament. But I mean, anybody who thinks that we're getting a referendum, you're living in a dreamland, and that goes for the leaders of political parties. Now, there's a difference between me and Sarwar, because when I say these words, it is the truth that comes out my mouth. Watch my lips. The referendum route to independence is dead. If you do not realise that and you keep pushing the referendum, then independence itself will be dead. We have to be the phoenix. We have to raise this independence movement up from the ashes again, because the SNP have more or less burnt it. We must build a new system, and that system is going in, winning majority of votes, majority of seats, and saying to Westminster very clear and very loud, we are an independent nation, because the people who have the authority to make that decision are the sovereign people of Scotland, and they have spoken loudly and clearly. So you either get around the negotiating tables, or we will just continue to run the Parliament as if it is an independent Parliament. Now, there's some people within this movement who believe that we are not ready yet to be independent. That is total and utter bollocks. And I'm sorry for the language, but it is. We are as ready as we could possibly be. In fact, we are more ready than any other country that has ever in the history of the world become independent. So stop the nonsense. Stop talking Scotland down. We are ready to go. On the 6th of May, that is not when we become independent. That's when we vote for it. It takes a transition. And during that transition is when you get everything in place for independence. Then you move on to independence. But to say we can't vote for independence just now because we are not ready is total and utter nonsense. So stop it. Stop conning the people of Scotland. You're supposed to be on our side. Start acting like it.
Yeah, well said. Alan's right, Lloyd. I mean, we have a separate health system, a separate education, a separate legal system, a separate kirk, if you like, as well. We have all these separate issues, a separate Scottish police force, a separate fire brigade service. We are more ready than any of the other 60-odd countries that left the UK.
Yeah, we are, but I think the major problem is people don't think we're ready because of the incompetence of the current Scottish National Party government. That's why people think we're not ready. But we know from the work that's been done by the Scottish Sovereignty Research Group, by Yes United, by Liberate Scotland, by Liberation Scotland, and by Salvo, and by the Scottish Currency Research Group, that the work has been done and is in preparation to lead to inform a negotiation team. What we're being conned into believing is that the incompetence of the current Scottish National Party government, as opposed to the Scottish National Party government between 2011 and 2015, the difference between the two is colossal. We had competence. There was no way you could possibly, I mean, did anybody suggest that in the run-up to the referendum in 2014 that we were not in a competent position to actually negotiate? No, they didn't. Why? Because we were. And if anyone believes that currently we are not in the position, it's because they look at the incompetence of the current Scottish National Party government under the leadership of John Swinney, and they see incompetence. They see ineptitude. You know, the classic of that is this week. This week, Mary McAllen, Housing Minister, instead of getting together with all the various stakeholders and announcing the creation of a national house building corporation, she was in the City of London seeking investment for house building in Scotland. Now, we've often referred to John Swinney as the Oliver Twist of Scottish politics. Well, we've got a new one now. We've got Mary McAllen, the Olivia Twist of Scottish politics. Scotland is ready. The work is being done. It's being done by people who are not obsessed with their own position and their own ego, the people who are out with Parliament, the people in the various organisations who are focused very firmly on what's necessary for us to develop as rapidly as possible a dynamic new country. All of those building blocks are in the process of being built. And if anybody thinks that the country is not ready, they are wrong. And they have to take their eyes off the incompetence that we have at Holyrood and recognise the competence we have out with Holyrood in the broader movement.
Yeah, well said. The clock's beating us, folks. But a couple of things I want to cover just quickly now. you've heard the SNP talking about, we're the party of independence. When you vote for us, you're voting for independence. We love independence. Here's Dave Duggan. He is talking about chicken eggs, the rage in the cage. That's why you sent him down to Westminster, was it? So he could talk about phasing out hens in cages. Really? Really? That's what it's about. You've got one job, Dave, and one job only. It isn't looking after chickens. Because it's time the chickens came home to roost for Westminster. So get your act together, boy, and start doing what we elected you for. Techie, can you take that down? Because I've lost my pictures. I can't get rid of it. Thank you. And one last thing before we go. Now, I'm going to be very careful what I say here. This week, the two Davies, and I've got to quickly make it, I will watch what I'm saying very much. The two Davies are no friends of mine. In fact, Mr. Milliken has banned me and blocked me for years from all his Facebook sites because I haven't toed the SNP line, and I have nothing to say. However, my solidarity is not for their beliefs or what they said, but the fact is that we've had Craig Murray, we've had Alex Salmond, we've had Mark Hurst, the two Davies, Dave Llewellyn. You don't hear them coming after any of the unionists, do you? We've got to be on our guard, folks. It's the people who are trying to wreck the British Union, get rid of the British Union, who are open to attack. Now, I'm not condoning what they did or agreeing with what they said, but I don't like to see fellow nationalists becoming subject to law for what they've said. I do believe that I thought we lived in a democracy, but apparently not. Now, I want to just say we're now finished for the evening. And if those of you who were there last night and saw this motley crew, are you not amazed that they were able to get up this morning and actually pull this podcast together? Because when I looked up at them last night as I was leaving, I thought, oh God, we've got problems tomorrow. So I congratulate you, my colleagues, for being able to actually pull this together. And I'm expecting when I say goodbye that you'll all be going, oh. But anyway, we're going for lunch. That's what we're going to do, because we don't get together often enough. So we're all going out for lunch, folks. But until we see you again, may you and yours, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.